My fiance's family had a tradition of tearing apart new spouses, and they spent 45 minutes telling everything that is wrong with me. They all went silent when it was my turn to speak. My fiance's family had a tradition they called the welcome circle. Every time someone new was about to officially join the family through marriage, they held a special dinner. At this dinner, the entire family would take turns telling the newcomer all the things they thought were wrong with them. They called it cleansing. They said it was important to air out concerns before the wedding so there were no secrets and no resentment. They said it helped new family members understand what they needed to work on to truly belong. My fiancé told me about this tradition 3 months before our wedding. His name was Oliver, and we had been together for 3 years. He said the welcome circle was just something his family did, and it wasn't as bad as it sounded. He said everyone went through it and everyone survived. He said his mother went through it when she married his father. His aunts went through it. His brother's wife went through it. He said it would be over in an hour, and then I would officially be accepted. I asked him what happened at his brother's wife's welcome circle. He got quiet and said it was a little rough, but she handled it well. I asked what they said to her. He said they told her she was too loud and laughed too much and didn't know how to dress appropriately for formal occasions. He said they told her she came from a family without class, and she needed to learn how to carry herself better. He said they told her she wasn't smart enough for his brother, and she should read more books. I asked how she reacted. He said she cried a little, but then thanked everyone for their honesty and promised to do better. She's been married to his brother for 6 years now. She barely speaks at family gatherings anymore. I told Oliver I didn't want to do the welcome circle. He said it wasn't optional. He said if I refused, his family would think I had something to hide. He said they would never fully accept me and our marriage would always have tension. He said it was just one night and I should do it for us. I agreed because I loved him and I wanted his family to accept me. Looking back, I should have seen that as the first red flag. The welcome circle was held at his parents' house on a Saturday evening. There were 14 people there. His parents, his grandparents, his brother and sister-in-law, his 2 aunts, 2 uncles, and 4 cousins. They sat in a large circle in the living room with 2 empty chairs in the middle. One for me and one for Oliver. His mother explained the rules. Each family member would share their honest observations about me. I was not allowed to interrupt or defend myself. I was supposed to listen and reflect and thank each person for their honesty when they finished. At the end, I would be given a chance to respond and tell the family how I planned to address their concerns. Then they would vote on whether to officially welcome me. I sat in that chair and listened for 45 minutes. His mother went first. She said I was too independent and didn't seem to value family enough. She said I worked too much and would probably neglect her son. She said my cooking wasn't good enough and Oliver would miss her meals. She said I dressed too casually and needed to put more effort into my appearance. His father said I talked too much about my own opinions and didn't listen enough. He said I seemed to think I was smarter than everyone in the room, and that was off-putting. He said my career was fine but not impressive, and I would never be able to provide for Oliver the way he deserved. His grandmother said I was too skinny and needed to eat more. She said my family clearly didn't teach me how to take care of myself. She said I smiled too much and it seemed fake. His grandfather said I didn't seem like the type to raise children properly. He said I seemed selfish and career-focused and probably wouldn't want to stay home with babies. His aunt said I was too quiet at family dinners and didn't make enough effort to get to know everyone. Then they said I was too loud when I did talk and interrupted people. His uncle said I didn't seem to respect Oliver's family history and traditions enough. They said I asked too many questions and should just accept how things were done. His cousin said I was boring and didn't have good enough stories. They said my hobbies were uninteresting and I probably wouldn't fit in at family vacations. His brother said I wasn't as pretty as the other women Oliver had dated, and he was surprised Oliver settled for me. His sister-in-law just stared at the floor and said nothing. I understood why she stayed quiet now. When everyone finished speaking, his mother smiled at me and asked how I planned to address all of their concerns. I looked around the room at these 14 people who had just spent 45 minutes tearing me apart. I looked at Oliver sitting next to me. He hadn't said a word to defend me. He just nodded along like everything they said was reasonable. I smiled back at his mother. Then I addressed each person one by one. I turned to his mother first and kept my voice steady. I told her I cook just fine and work hard because I value my career and I dress for my own comfort and not for her approval. Her mouth opened a little, but nothing came out. I shifted to his father and said my opinions are informed and valuable, and my career is exactly as impressive as it needs to be, and I will never apologize for being educated. His face went red, but he didn't interrupt me. I looked at his grandmother and said, I eat enough and my family taught me to take care of myself just fine, and my smile is genuine when I'm actually happy. She clutched her purse tighter. I told his grandfather I would be an excellent mother if I chose to have children and my career doesn't make me selfish. I addressed the aunts and said I'm exactly as quiet or loud as the situation calls for, and I don't need their approval on how I communicate. The uncles got my attention next, and I told them I respect traditions that deserve respect, and asking questions is how intelligent people learn. I looked at the cousins and said my hobbies interest me, and that's all that matters, and I don't need to perform for their entertainment. Then I turned to his brother and said, I'm exactly pretty enough, and Oliver didn't settle for anything. The whole time, Oliver sat frozen next to me with his hands gripped together and his face pale. He didn't say one word to defend me or support me or tell his family they were wrong. He just sat there nodding slightly like he agreed with everything they had said about me. I stood up and the chair scraped against the floor. I looked around at all 14 of them sitting in their circle and I told them I won't be joining this family. I said I refused to marry into a tradition built on tearing people down and making them feel small. His mother started to speak, but I kept going. I told Oliver that any man who would sit silently while his family attacks his partner for 45 minutes isn't someone I can trust with my future. I said I deserve someone who will defend me and stand up for me and protect me from people who want to hurt me. The room went completely silent and everyone stared at me like I had just spoken a different language. I walked toward the door and grabbed my purse from the side table. Nobody moved or said anything, and I could feel all their eyes on my back as I left. I made it to my car before Oliver came running out of the house. He grabbed my arm and spun me around and immediately started talking about how I was overreacting. He said I was embarrassing him in front of his whole family and making a scene over nothing. He claimed the circle was just honesty, and everyone goes through it, and his brother's wife survived just fine. I pulled my arm away and told him his brother's wife doesn't speak anymore at family dinners. He said I was being too sensitive and throwing away 3 years over one difficult evening. He kept talking faster, and his voice got louder, and he said his family was just trying to help me improve myself. I opened my car door and told him that watching him nod along to every insult told me everything I needed to know about who he really is. He reached for the door, but I got in and locked it and started the engine. He was still talking and gesturing as I backed out of the driveway, and his mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear the words anymore. The drive back to my apartment took 20 minutes, and my hands shook on the steering wheel the whole time. I kept replaying the last hour in my head and seeing Oliver's face as his family destroyed me piece by piece. When I got inside, I made it to the bathroom before my legs gave out. I sat on the cold tile floor and started crying so hard I couldn't breathe right. My whole body shook and tears ran down my face and I couldn't stop. But even through the tears, I felt this weird sense of relief washing over me. It felt like I had just dodged something terrible. I looked down at my engagement ring and the diamond caught the light. I realized I had been making excuses for Oliver's family dynamics for months. There were so many small red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe everything would be okay. His mother's comments about my clothes, his father's dismissive attitude toward my job, the way Oliver always took their side in small disagreements. I twisted the ring on my finger and knew I couldn't wear it anymore. My phone started buzzing in my purse around 10 that night. Oliver was calling and I let it go to voicemail. He called again 5 minutes later and again after that. By midnight, he had called 17 times. The next morning, I woke up to 32 text messages. Some of them were apologies saying he was sorry and he should have defended me. Others were accusations saying I humiliated him and ruined everything. His mother left a voicemail around noon saying I owed the family an apology for my disrespectful outburst. She said they opened their home to me and tried to help me, and I threw it back in their faces. His father sent 3 emails about how I hurt Oliver deeply and damaged the family's trust. The messages kept coming for 3 days straight. Oliver alternated between begging me to come back and telling me I was being ridiculous. His mother sent texts about how I clearly didn't understand the importance of family. I blocked most of their numbers, but I saved every message and voicemail and email. Some instinct told me I might need evidence of their behavior later. On day 4, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said she was the sister-in-law and asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost didn't respond, but something made me say yes. We met at a small place near my apartment and sat in a corner booth away from other people. She looked different from she did at the circle. Her eyes were brighter and she sat up straighter. She told me she had been waiting 6 years for someone to walk out of that room. She said watching me stand up for myself gave her actual chills. Then she started describing who she used to be before the circle. She was loud and funny and confident and always had an opinion about everything. She said Oliver's family spent an hour telling her everything that was wrong with her personality. After the wedding, she started trying to become invisible. She stopped laughing too loud and stopped sharing her thoughts and stopped wearing clothes that stood out. She said she thought if she could just be perfect enough, they would finally accept her. But they never did, and now she barely recognizes herself anymore. Her hands shook a little as she talked, and I realized she was terrified someone would see us together. The practical reality of everything hit me hard the next week. I started calling wedding vendors to cancel, and every single one had a no-refund policy. The venue kept $5,000. The caterer kept $3,000. The photographer kept $1,500. I lost almost $10,000 in deposits, and there was nothing I could do about it. My landlord told me I couldn't break the lease I shared with Oliver without paying a huge penalty. I was stuck paying half the rent on an apartment I couldn't afford alone, while also trying to find a new place to live. My savings account was draining fast, and I had moments of panic at 2 a.m. wondering if I made a huge mistake. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe one bad evening wasn't worth losing everything. But then I would remember Oliver's face as his family tore me apart, and my resolve would get hard again. I started looking at tiny studio apartments I could barely afford and realized I was about to lose my financial stability over this. Oliver's mother showed up at my workplace on a Tuesday afternoon. I was walking to my car after a long shift, and she was just standing there waiting by my driver's side door. She said we needed to talk, and I clearly didn't understand how important family is. I told her to leave, but she kept talking. She said every marriage requires sacrifice and compromise, and I was being selfish and immature. She said Oliver was willing to forgive me if I would just apologize to everyone and promise to do better. Her voice had this sweet tone that made my skin crawl. I looked her right in the eyes and told her that her tradition is abuse disguised as honesty. I said I will never apologize for having self-respect, and she needs to leave me alone. She looked shocked, like nobody had ever talked to her that way before. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I got in my car and locked the doors. She stood there in the parking lot watching me drive away. I finally told my parents everything that weekend. I drove to their house and sat at their kitchen table and told them about the circle and Oliver's silence and his family's harassment. I told them details I had been hiding for months about how his mother criticized everything I did and how his father dismissed my career constantly. My dad got quiet in that dangerous way where his jaw clenches and his eyes go hard. He said no daughter of his will ever be treated like that, and if Oliver contacts me again, he'll handle it personally. My mom started crying and immediately offered me their guest room and help with moving costs. She said I could stay as long as I needed and they would help me get back on my feet. Having their support after experiencing Oliver's conditional love made something click in my brain. I realized how twisted his family's version of relationships really was. Love wasn't supposed to come with a list of requirements and constant criticism. It was supposed to be unconditional and supportive and safe. 3 weeks after I walked out, Oliver showed up at my apartment with flowers and a prepared speech. I opened the door, and he started talking immediately about how he had been thinking about everything I said. He claimed he talked to his family and they were willing to start over with me. He said we could skip certain traditions and build our own path forward. The flowers were expensive, and he was wearing the shirt I always said I liked. For just a moment, I felt tempted by the familiarity of it all. 3 years is a long time to invest in someone. We had inside jokes and shared memories and a whole life planned together. But then I asked him one question. I asked if he told his family their circle was wrong. He hesitated for maybe 3 seconds, but it was enough. His eyes shifted away from mine and he started talking about how it's complicated, and they meant well. I handed him back the flowers and told him nothing has actually changed. He tried to argue, but I closed the door while he was still talking. I heard him stand outside for a few minutes before finally leaving. The next morning, I woke up to an email notification on my phone. The sender was an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line said it was from the sister-in-law. I sat up in bed and opened it. The message was long and took me several minutes to read through. She started by apologizing for not speaking up during the welcome circle. She said watching me walk out gave her courage to finally tell someone the truth about Oliver's family. Then she told me something Oliver never mentioned. His brother was married before. The first wife went through the welcome circle just like she did. Just like I was supposed to. That first wife stayed and married into the family 8 years ago. The sister-in-law described how Oliver's mother criticized everything the first wife did. Her cooking was wrong. Her cleaning wasn't good enough. Her career choices were selfish. Her family wasn't good enough. For 2 years, the entire family picked apart every decision she made. They told her she was gaining weight. They said she dressed poorly. They questioned her intelligence constantly. The first wife started having panic attacks. She stopped seeing her friends because Oliver's family said they were bad influences. She quit her job because Oliver's mother convinced her she needed to focus on being a better wife. After 2 years, she finally left. She moved back to her home state, and Oliver's family told everyone she had mental problems. They said she was unstable and couldn't handle being part of a real family. The sister-in-law said she never knew about the first wife until after her own wedding. Oliver's brother casually mentioned it one day like it was no big deal. She realized then that the pattern would repeat with her. And it did. For 6 years, she's been trying to become whatever they want her to be. She said my walking out made her see that she's been slowly disappearing. She thanked me for showing her that leaving was possible. I sat there staring at my phone feeling sick. Oliver never told me his brother was married before. He never mentioned that another woman went through this exact same thing and it destroyed her. He knew what his family did to people and he still brought me to that circle. He knew and he said nothing. I got to work an hour late that morning because I couldn't stop thinking about the email. My boss noticed I seemed distracted during our team meeting. I tried to focus, but my mind kept going back to that first wife and wondering where she was now. Around lunchtime, I realized I had completely forgotten about a client presentation that was due that afternoon. The deadline had been on my calendar for 3 weeks. I always hit my deadlines. Always. But I had been so consumed with the breakup and the apartment search and Oliver's constant messages that I let it slip. I rushed to pull together something, but it wasn't my best work. My boss called me into her office after I submitted it. She closed the door and asked if everything was okay. I told her I was going through a difficult breakup and I was sorry for missing the deadline. She said the work I submitted wasn't up to my usual standards. She said she understood personal problems happen, but I needed to make sure they didn't affect my professional reputation. She was kind about it, but I could see the concern in her face. This job was my career. I had worked so hard to get here and build my reputation. Now I was letting my personal mess destroy everything I had built professionally. I spent that night lying awake wondering if I had made a huge mistake. Maybe I should have just gone through with the wedding. Maybe I should have tried harder to make it work. I had lost my relationship. I was about to lose my apartment. Now I might lose my career too. Standing up for myself was supposed to feel empowering, but instead I just felt terrified that I was throwing away my entire life. 2 days later, my best friend Elena called me sounding angry. She asked if I knew Oliver's brother. I said I had met him a few times at family dinners. She told me he had sent her a long message on social media. She read parts of it to me over the phone. He said he was worried about me. He said I seemed unstable and emotional lately. He suggested that my reaction to the welcome circle was extreme and concerning. He said maybe I needed professional help to deal with my issues. He told Elena that as my friend, she should be concerned about my mental state. He implied that I was having some kind of breakdown, and my friends needed to intervene. He painted the whole situation like I was the problem, like I was crazy for walking out, like there was something wrong with me for refusing to accept their tradition. Elena was furious. She had already screenshotted everything and sent it to me before calling. She told him to never contact her again and blocked him immediately. But I realized what they were doing. They were trying to isolate me. If they could convince my friends that I was unstable, then I would have no support system. They wanted everyone to think I was the problem, so nobody would believe my side of what happened. It was calculated and cruel. I saved all the screenshots in a folder on my computer. Some part of me knew I might need evidence of their behavior later. The apartment search became urgent after that. I couldn't stay in the place I shared with Oliver. Every corner reminded me of the life I thought we were building. I looked at places I could barely afford on my salary alone. Most were too expensive or in bad neighborhoods or required income I didn't have. I finally found a tiny studio apartment across town. It was smaller than my bedroom at Oliver's place. The kitchen was just a hot plate and a mini fridge. The bathroom was so small I could barely turn around. But it was mine and I could afford it if I was careful with money. I signed the lease and put down the deposit. It took almost all my savings. I scheduled the move for a day when Oliver would be at work. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear him try to convince me to stay. My dad drove over with his truck to help me move. We packed up my stuff while Oliver was gone. My clothes and books and the few pieces of furniture that were actually mine. It didn't take long. I realized how little of that apartment was really mine. Most of the furniture was Oliver's. Most of the kitchen stuff belonged to his mother who had given it to us. I had been living in a space that never felt like home. My dad loaded everything into his truck without saying much. When we finished, he looked at me and said he was proud of me for choosing myself. He didn't say I told you, so even though he had never liked Oliver's family, he just helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs to my new studio and told me I could always come home if I needed to. 2 months after the welcome circle, I stopped at my usual coffee shop on the way to work. I was standing in line waiting to order when I saw Oliver sitting at a table by the window. My heart started beating fast and my hands got sweaty. I thought about leaving, but he had already seen me. He stood up and walked over. He asked if we could talk for a minute. I said I only had a few minutes before work. We sat down at his table and he started talking about how much he missed me. He said he had been thinking about everything that happened. He asked if there was any chance we could try again. I looked at him sitting across from me and realized something strange. He looked smaller somehow. Less important. 2 months ago, the thought of losing him made me feel like my world was ending. Now I just felt tired and a little sad. Sad for the relationship I thought we had that never actually existed. Sad for the time I wasted trying to fit into his family. But I didn't feel the pull I expected. I didn't want to reach across the table and hold his hand. I didn't want to hear about how much he missed me. I just wanted to get my coffee and go to work. I told him I hoped he was doing okay, but I needed to go. He tried to say something else, but I stood up and walked to the counter. I ordered my coffee and left without looking back. The whole interaction took maybe 5 minutes. I realized during my drive to work that I was going to be fine. That afternoon, the sister-in-law called me crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she finally told her husband she wanted marriage counseling. She said she couldn't keep living the way they had been living. She needed help dealing with how his family treated her. He refused immediately. He said she was influenced by me. He called me a bad influence who was trying to destroy their family. He said if she kept talking to me, he would have serious concerns about their marriage. She was terrified, but she was also determined. She said she couldn't go back to being silent after finding her voice again. She said watching me walk away showed her that she deserved better too. She asked if I regretted leaving Oliver. I told her the truth. I said the first few weeks were awful and scary, and I questioned everything. But now I felt lighter than I had in years. I felt like myself again. She cried harder and said she didn't know if she was strong enough to leave. I told her she didn't have to decide anything right now. She just needed to keep being honest about what she needed. We talked for almost an hour. When we hung up, I realized that walking away from Oliver's family wasn't just about saving myself. It was about showing her that leaving was possible. That she didn't have to spend the rest of her life disappearing to make other people comfortable. 3 days later, my mom called to say a letter had been delivered to their house addressed to me. She asked if she should open it or bring it over. I told her to open it and read it to me. It was from Oliver. A long handwritten letter that my mom said was at least 4 pages. She started reading and I could hear the anger building in her voice. Oliver wrote that he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said he realized how much his family's opinion meant to him, but he was willing to make a sacrifice for us. He said he would cut off his entire family if I would take him back. He said we could move to a different city and start fresh without them. He made it sound like he was offering me this huge gift. But the whole letter was full of guilt trips. He kept saying how much he was willing to sacrifice. He said I was forcing him to choose between his family and me. He said no other woman had ever made him feel this conflicted. He wrote about how hard this decision was for him, and how much it would hurt to lose his family. Every sentence made it clear that he resented having to pick. He was offering to cut them off, but he wanted me to know what it was costing him. He wanted me to feel guilty for making him choose. My mom finished reading and asked what I wanted her to do with it. I told her to throw it away. I didn't need to respond. Oliver was still trying to manipulate me into feeling responsible for his choices. He hadn't learned anything. He still didn't understand that the problem wasn't just his family. The problem was him and his inability to stand up for what was right. I called my friend who works as a lawyer and asked her advice about getting Oliver and his family to stop contacting me. She said I should send a formal cease and contact letter. She offered to write it for me for free, but I insisted on paying her something. It cost me $300 I didn't really have, but it felt necessary. The letter went to Oliver and his parents and his brother. It said they needed to stop all communication with me immediately. It said any further contact would be considered harassment. It mentioned the messages to Elena and the voicemails from his mother and the letter to my parents' house. It said I was documenting everything in case I needed legal protection later. My friend sent it certified mail so we would have proof they received it. She told me to keep records of any contact that happened after they got the letter. I felt better having that boundary in place even though it cost money I couldn't afford. At least now there was a legal record that I had asked them to leave me alone. 3 months after walking out of the welcome circle, I made an appointment with a therapist. I knew I needed help understanding why I almost married into that family. I needed to figure out what made me ignore so many warning signs. The first session was hard. The therapist asked me to describe my relationship with Oliver from the beginning. As I talked, I started seeing patterns I hadn't noticed before. How he always made plans without asking my opinion first. How he would get quiet and distant when I disagreed with him. How he expected me to spend every holiday with his family, but never made time for mine. The therapist said I had been taught to be accommodating. She said I saw love as something you earn through sacrifice instead of something freely given. She said that made me vulnerable to Oliver's family dynamics. Over the next few weeks, we worked on understanding why I stayed so long. Why I agreed to the welcome circle even though everything in me said it was wrong. She helped me see that I had been taught to value other people's comfort over my own well-being. She said learning to recognize my own worth independent of anyone else's approval would take time. The sessions were expensive and hard, but I kept going. I was learning things about myself that I needed to know. 4 months after the breakup, my boss called me into her office again. I felt my stomach drop, thinking I was about to get fired for that missed deadline. Instead, she told me I was getting a promotion. She said I had successfully completed a major project, and my work over the past few months showed real resilience and focus. The promotion came with a raise. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to make my studio apartment affordable without help from my parents. She said she had been impressed by how I handled the difficult period after my breakup. She said I had proven I could separate my personal life from my professional responsibilities. I walked out of her office feeling genuinely proud of myself for the first time since everything fell apart. I had survived the worst few months of my life and come out stronger. I was building a life that was completely mine. A life based on my own values and choices instead of trying to fit into someone else's expectations. That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment eating takeout and watching my favorite show that Oliver always complained about. I looked around at the space I had decorated exactly how I wanted. I thought about my job and my friends and my family who supported me unconditionally. I realized I was actually happy. Not the anxious happiness I felt with Oliver, where I was always worried about doing something wrong. Real happiness that came from being completely myself without apology. I found out through a mutual friend who ran into Oliver's mother at the grocery store. She mentioned it casually, like she was sharing gossip about the weather. Oliver's parents were telling everyone who would listen that I had some kind of breakdown and canceled the wedding for no real reason. They were saying I got cold feet and panicked, that I overreacted to normal family bonding. My friend asked if I wanted her to set the record straight, and I almost said yes. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to make sure everyone knew what really happened in that living room. But then I realized something that felt like freedom. Their opinion didn't actually matter anymore. The people who really knew me understood the truth without me having to explain it. Everyone else wasn't my problem or my concern. I had spent 3 years trying to make Oliver's family like me, and now I was finally done caring what they thought. 2 weeks later, I was eating lunch in the break room at work when a coworker sat down across from me. She was engaged and planning her wedding for next spring. She started talking about her future in-laws and mentioned they had some interesting traditions for welcoming new family members. The way she said it made my stomach drop. I asked her what kind of traditions, trying to keep my voice casual. She described something that sounded way too familiar. A special dinner where the family would share honest feedback to help her become a better wife. She laughed nervously and said it sounded weird, but her fiancé promised it was just their way of showing they cared. I put down my sandwich and looked at her directly. I told her I had been in a similar situation and it didn't end well. Over the next hour, I shared a carefully edited version of the welcome circle, watching her face change as she recognized the warning signs in her own relationship. She went quiet for a long time after I finished talking. Then she asked me how I knew it was time to leave. I told her the truth. When the person who claims to love you sits silently while others tear you apart, that tells you everything you need to know. 2 weeks after that conversation, she stopped by my desk to thank me. She said she had been thinking about everything I told her and decided to reconsider the relationship. She said she talked to her fiancé about changing the tradition, and he refused, said she was influenced by negative people. She realized if he couldn't stand up for her before the wedding, he never would after. I felt terrible that she was going through pain, but also relieved that maybe my awful experience helped someone else avoid the same mistake. 4 months after I walked out of that living room, I was sitting in my studio apartment on a Friday night. I had ordered Chinese takeout and was watching a crime documentary that Oliver always complained was too depressing. My apartment was small, but I had decorated it exactly how I wanted, with bright colors and plants and artwork that made me happy. I was wearing sweatpants and an old college shirt with no makeup on. I realized as I sat there eating noodles straight from the container that I was genuinely happy. Not the anxious kind of happy I felt with Oliver where I was always monitoring my behavior and managing his moods. This was different. This happiness came from being completely myself without worrying about meeting impossible standards or fixing things that were wrong with me. I didn't have to cook fancy meals or dress up or pretend to enjoy his family's company. I could just exist as myself and that was enough. The thought made me smile into my takeout container. I started building a life where people celebrated me instead of trying to change me. My parents called every week just to check in and tell me they were proud of how strong I was being. My best friend came over most weekends and we would cook together and watch movies and talk about everything except Oliver. At work, I was thriving because I could focus all my energy on projects instead of relationship drama. I got assigned to lead a new team, and my boss said she chose me because I had proven I could handle pressure and come out stronger. I even started dating again, though I was much more careful this time. I paid attention to red flags I would have ignored before. When a guy I went out with made a joke about his mother knowing best about everything, I ended it after 2 dates. When another one talked over me at dinner, I didn't give him a second chance. I had learned that I deserved someone who would defend me, not someone who would sit silently while others attacked me. The sister-in-law texted me sometimes with updates. She started going to counseling and setting boundaries with her husband's family. She said it was hard, but she was remembering who she used to be before the welcome circle broke her down. Walking away from Oliver and his family was the hardest thing I ever did. It cost me 3 years of my life, thousands of dollars in wedding deposits, and the future I thought I wanted. But it taught me something more valuable than any of that. It taught me that I was strong enough to choose myself, even when it meant losing everything I thought I needed. I learned to trust my own judgment instead of second-guessing every instinct. I built a life based on my own values instead of trying to fit into someone else's twisted idea of family. And that was worth more than any acceptance from people who thought love meant tearing each other down.